I designed the greatest invasion in galactic history and it succeeded, and that is how my civilization died. I want to begin with that, because everyone who tells this story assumes that lost everything means we were defeated, that humanity destroyed our fleets and broke our armies and threw us off their world. We were not defeated. We won. We conquered Earth, took it, held it. The invasion did everything I designed it to do, achieved every objective, succeeded beyond even my own ambitious projections. And in succeeding, it destroyed the Vorth Unity utterly, more completely than any defeat could have, because we did not lose the war. We lost ourselves in the winning of it, and that is a stranger and more total kind of losing than any battlefield could ever inflict. Let me tell you what the Vorth Unity was, because you have to understand our strength to understand how our strength became the instrument of our ending. The Vorth were the most unified civilization in the catalogued galaxy. That was our whole nature, our pride, the foundation of everything we were, unity, total and absolute, a civilization that moved as one. Where other peoples were fractured, divided into factions and individuals and competing wills, the Vorth were one. One purpose, one command, one will running through the whole of our vast society like a single nerve. We did not have politics, in the way other peoples had politics, because politics is the management of disagreement and the Vorth did not disagree. We deliberated, and we reached the unified position, and then we all held it, every Vorth without dissent, because dissent was not a thing our nature produced. We were not slaves. I want to be clear about that, because outsiders always assumed our unity was imposed, was tyranny, was the boot on the neck. It was not. Our unity was who we were, as natural to us as breathing, a people who genuinely thought as one and acted as one and wanted, all of us, the same things, and our unity was our strength, the thing that made us the greatest power in the reach, because a civilization that moves as one cannot be divided, cannot be turned against itself, cannot be defeated by any of the means that defeat divided peoples. And it was our unity that decided humanity had to be conquered. I was the chief strategist of the unity, the one whose role was to study threats and design the responses. And I want to tell you that the decision to invade humanity was not made out of greed or cruelty, but out of fear, the fear of the unified for the thing that threatens unity. Because humanity threatened our unity, not with weapons but with what they were. The humans were everything the Vorth were not, divided, fractured. A chaos of competing wills, individuals who disagreed with one another constantly, a civilization with no single command, no unified will, a churning mess of dissent and argument and individual choice that, by every Vorth understanding of how civilizations work, should have been weak, should have been easily defeated, and instead was strong, dangerously, inexplicably strong, rising through the galaxy on the power of their chaos the way we rose on the power of our unity. And humanity's chaos was contagious. That was the thing the unity feared, the deep thing, though we did not yet understand how right we were to fear it. The human idea, the idea of the individual, the idea that a person should not be commanded but should choose, the idea that disagreement was not weakness but strength, the idea of freedom. This idea spread, wherever humanity went, into the peoples they contacted, and it was poison to unity, because a people who catches the human idea of individual freedom stops being able to be unified, starts to fracture, starts to produce the dissent that unity cannot survive. We had watched it happen to lesser peoples on humanity's borders, watched unified or commanded societies dissolve into chaos after contact with the human idea, watched the contagion of freedom unmake the order of every society it touched. And the unity looked at this and understood it as the deepest possible threat, because the human idea, spreading, would eventually reach the Vorth, and the Vorth were unity, were nothing but unity, and a contagion that dissolves unity would dissolve us entirely. So we resolved to destroy the source, to conquer humanity, not to rule them particularly, but to end the spread of their idea, to crush the source of the contagion before it could reach us, to remove from the galaxy the people whose mere existence threatened to dissolve the unity that was our whole being. I designed the invasion. The greatest invasion in galactic history, because humanity was the greatest threat in galactic history, and a threat to your very nature demands a response proportional to your nature, and the Vorth nature was total, so the invasion was total. The full might of the most unified civilization in the reach, brought to bear on the conquest of the divided, chaotic, dangerous humans. And here is the thing I did not understand, the thing that no Vorth understood because we could not understand it, because understanding it required thinking in a way our unity made impossible. To conquer humanity, we would have to fight humanity. And to fight humanity, to actually defeat them in the field, we would have to adapt to the way humanity fought. And the way humanity fought was the expression of everything they were: divided, individual, improvised, chaotic. Human warfare had no single command that we could decapitate, no unified will we could break. It was 1,000 individual humans making individual decisions, adapting locally, improvising constantly, fighting as a swarm of free agents rather than a single coordinated force. And to defeat a swarm of free agents, we learned, slowly, at terrible cost, we could not fight as a unity. A unity is a single thing, and a single thing can be predicted, can be countered, can be defeated by a sufficiently adaptive enemy, and the humans were nothing if not adaptive. To beat them, we had to become adaptive ourselves. We had to decentralize. We had to let our commanders make individual decisions. We had to improvise, to fracture our single will into many wills that could each respond to the local chaos the humans generated. We had to, in order to defeat humanity, fight the way humanity fought. We had to become like them. I gave the order myself. I want that on the record because it is the thing I am most responsible for, the decision that won the war and ended my civilization. Early in the invasion, when our unified force was being bled and baffled by the humans' chaotic adaptive defense, when our single coordinated will kept being outmaneuvered by 1,000 independent human decisions, I made the strategic judgment that won the war. I ordered the Vorth forces to decentralize, to break our unity in the field into independent commands that could adapt and improvise the way the humans did. I ordered Vorth officers to make individual decisions without waiting for the unified will. I ordered them to disagree with one another, to compete, to innovate independently, to become, for the purpose of defeating humanity, a chaos of individual Vorth wills that could match the human chaos. It was brilliant strategy. It worked. It won the war. And it was the beginning of the end of the Vorth, because a people whose entire nature is unity cannot break their unity, even temporarily, even strategically, even to win a war, without beginning to dissolve the very thing they are. We won. I want to be clear that the strategy succeeded completely. The decentralized, adaptive, individualized Vorth forces matched the humans, then beat them, then conquered Earth. The greatest invasion in galactic history achieved its objective. We took the human homeworld, occupied it, ended the human threat at its source. By every measure I had designed the invasion to achieve, it was a total victory. And by the time it was won, the Vorth who had won it were not the Vorth who had launched it. They had spent the war learning to be individuals, learning to make their own decisions, to disagree, to improvise, to value their own judgment over the unified will, because that was what winning the war had required. They had caught, in the fighting of humanity, the very contagion the invasion had been launched to prevent, the human idea, the individual, the freedom to choose and disagree, caught it not from humanity's preaching but from humanity's fighting, from being forced to fight like humans in order to beat humans. The invasion had been designed to stop the spread of the human idea. And the invasion had been the single greatest vector for the spread of the human idea in galactic history, because it had taken the most unified civilization in the reach and forced it, in order to win, to become individual, to learn freedom as a weapon, and to discover, too late, that freedom learned as a weapon is freedom still, and does not unlearn itself when the war is over. That is how we lost everything. Not in defeat, in victory. The Vorth forces came home from the conquest of Earth as changed beings, individuals now, who had tasted the making of their own decisions and would not give it back, who had learned to disagree and found that they liked it, who returned to the unified homeworld carrying the human idea in their changed souls. And the human idea spread, the way it always spreads, from the returned soldiers into the home population, and the Vorth Unity, the most unified civilization in the catalogued galaxy, the people who moved as one, the people whose whole nature and strength was their oneness, began to fracture, to argue, to dissolve into individuals, to catch the contagion of freedom we had launched the greatest invasion in history to prevent, caught it from our own victorious soldiers, who had learned it in the winning of the war we fought to stop it. I will tell you how it ended, how the unity dissolved, what became of the Vorth, what I came to understand about what we had done. But you have the heart of it now. We launched the greatest invasion in galactic history, and we won it, and the winning of it destroyed us. Because to conquer a free people you must learn to fight like a free people, and to fight like a free people you must become free, and a people who has become free cannot go back to being a unity. And so the conquerors of humanity came home from their total victory carrying the seed of humanity's deepest idea, and that seed grew, and the Vorth Unity died of its own triumph. Killed not by human weapons but by the human idea, which we had carried home ourselves, in our own changed hearts, as the price of a victory that cost us everything we were. The dissolution did not look like dissolution at first. It looked like victory's afterglow, like the natural settling of a triumphant people. And that is why no one stopped it, because no one, least of all me, recognized it for what it was until it had gone too far to reverse. The returned soldiers came home heroes, the conquerors of Earth, and the unity celebrated them. And in the celebration, no one noticed that the heroes had come home changed, that the conquest had altered them in a way that no Vorth had ever been altered, and that the alteration was already, quietly, spreading. I noticed it first in small things, the way you notice the early symptoms of an illness as minor irritations before you understand they are the disease. A returned officer in a deliberation voiced a disagreement, not the structured dissent that precedes unity, but a real disagreement, held past the point where unity should have formed, an individual insisting on his own judgment against the unified position. It was a small thing. It was also impossible by everything the Vorth were, and I remember the unease it produced in the chamber, the sense that something had happened that should not be able to happen. And then it happened again, with another returned officer, and another, and slowly I began to understand that the soldiers we had sent to conquer humanity had come back carrying something, and the something was the human idea, and it was spreading. I have to explain how it spread, because the how is the whole tragedy. It did not spread through preaching. The humans did not convert our soldiers with arguments. Our soldiers would have been immune to arguments, would have rejected human ideology the way a healthy body rejects a foreign thing. The human idea spread through practice, through the soldiers having spent years in the war making their own decisions. That was the vector I had created with my decentralization order. For years, in order to beat the humans, Vorth officers had been making individual choices, disagreeing with one another, improvising, trusting their own judgment over the unified will, not because they believed in individualism, but because the war required it. And a being who practices individual choice for years becomes, whatever they believe, an individual, because individualism is not finally a belief. It is a habit, a capacity, a muscle, and our soldiers had spent the war building that muscle until it was stronger than their unity, and they came home unable to stop using it, because you cannot unbuild a muscle by deciding to. Because the capacity for individual judgment, once developed, does not retract. The returned soldiers were individuals now in their bones, whatever they told themselves they believed. And individuals placed back into a unity do not dissolve back into the unity. They fracture it, because a single individual in a unity is a point of descent, and descent in a unity is a crack, and cracks spread. The soldiers had not learned to believe in human freedom. They had learned to do it in the war, and the doing had changed them, and now they could not stop doing it, and their doing it was dissolving the unity around them. Because a Vorth who insists on his own judgment teaches the Vorth around him that judgment can be insisted on, and the teaching spreads, individual to individual, the human idea propagating not as a doctrine but as a discovered capacity, the discovery that you can decide for yourself, which, once discovered, cannot be undiscovered. And the home population caught it from the soldiers. That was the second wave, the one that finished us. The returned conquerors, individuals now, moved back into Vorth society, into their families and their communities and their roles, and they brought their individualism with them, and the Vorth around them, who had never been to the war, who had never been forced to develop the capacity for individual judgment, watched the returned soldiers exercise that capacity, and some of them began to imitate it, to discover the capacity in themselves, to learn that they too could decide, could disagree, could be individuals. And once a few caught it, it spread faster, because the more individuals there were, the more permission there was to be one, until the contagion reached a threshold and became unstoppable, the whole Vorth population discovering, in a single generation, the human capacity for individual freedom that we had launched the greatest invasion in history to prevent. The unity began to come apart, not violently. That is the thing people expect, the civil war, the chaos, and it was not like that, at least not at first. It came apart quietly, structurally, as the thing that had held us together, the genuine unity of will, the real oneness of the Vorth, dissolved into a population of individuals who no longer thought as one, no longer wanted the same things, no longer moved together. The deliberations that had always produced unity now produced disagreement, faction, debate. The single will that had run through the whole of Vorth society fractured into a million individual wills, and the civilization that had been strong precisely because it was one became, in the space of a generation, a chaos of competing individuals, became, in other words, like humanity, the very thing we had invaded humanity to avoid becoming. I watched it happen, and I understood it, and I could not stop it, and the not being able to stop it taught me the deepest thing about what we had done, because I tried to stop it. I went before the dissolving unity, and I told them what was happening, that we had caught the human idea, that our victory had infected us, that the unity was dissolving, and we had to find a way to restore it before we lost ourselves entirely. And the response I received taught me that it was already too late, because the Vorth I addressed did not respond as a unity. They responded as individuals, each with his own opinion about what I had said, some agreeing, some disagreeing, some proposing this and some proposing that, the whole chamber a chaos of individual responses, where once there would have been a single unified reply. I had stood up to warn the unity that it was dissolving, and the dissolving unity had answered me in 1,000 individual voices, which was itself the proof that the dissolution was complete, that there was no unity left to warn, that the thing I was trying to save had already become the thing I was warning against. And here is the part that is the true turn of the story, the part I did not expect, the part that is the reason this is not simply a tragedy. Because as I watched the Vorth become individuals, as I watched the unity dissolve into a chaos of competing wills, I waited for the weakness to come, the weakness that our whole understanding of the galaxy had taught us must follow the loss of unity. A divided people is a weak people. That was the foundation of everything the Vorth believed. That was why we had feared the human idea, because it would divide us, and division was weakness. And so I watched our division, expecting our weakness, expecting the dissolving Vorth to be conquered in their turn, to fall to some unified enemy the way we had expected divided peoples to fall. The weakness did not come. That was the thing that undid my entire understanding of the galaxy. The Vorth became individuals, became divided, became a chaos of competing wills, and they did not become weak. They became, instead, what humanity was. Strong in a way I had never understood, strong through their division rather than despite it, strong because a million individual minds solving problems independently solve more problems than a single unified mind, because a people who can disagree can correct their errors in a way a unity never can, because individual judgment, multiplied across a population, produces a kind of collective intelligence and adaptability and resilience that no unity could ever match. The Vorth, becoming individuals, did not weaken. They flourished, began to innovate as they never had, to adapt as they never had, to produce the chaotic creative abundance that we had always seen in humanity and dismissed as the disorder of an inferior people, and that I now understood was not disorder at all but a higher order, the order of freedom, which looks like chaos to the unified eye, but is in fact the most powerful arrangement a civilization can take. We had invaded humanity because we believed their freedom was weakness and our unity was strength, and in conquering them, we had caught their freedom and lost our unity and discovered, too late, after we had launched the greatest invasion in history to prevent exactly this, that we had had it backward all along. Their freedom was the strength. Our unity was the weakness, the brittleness, the thing that made us one easily broken thing instead of a million resilient things. We had been afraid of the human idea because we thought it would dissolve our strength. It had dissolved our strength, and our strength had been the weakness, and dissolving it had made us, for the first time in our history, actually strong. That is where part 2 ends. With the unity dissolved, the Vorth become individuals, and the strategist who designed the invasion discovering that everything he believed about strength and unity and freedom had been backward, that the conquest of humanity had not destroyed the Vorth but transformed them, killing the unified civilization that launched the invasion, and replacing it with something stronger that we had spent our whole history fearing. In part 3, I will tell you what became of the transformed Vorth, and what became of me, the last strategist of a unity that no longer exists, and the final thing I understood about why the greatest invasion in galactic history ended not in the conquest of humanity, but in the conquest of the Vorth by the human idea, and whether that conquest, in the end, was a thing to mourn, or the best thing that ever happened to my people, who lost everything they were, and became something they had never imagined they could be. I have to tell you about the humans we conquered, because what happened between us and them after the war is the thing that finally taught me what we had actually done, and it is not what either of us expected, because the conquerors and the conquered both discovered, in the years after the invasion, that the words had stopped meaning what they were supposed to mean. We had conquered Earth. We held it. By every formal measure, humanity was a subject people and the Vorth were their rulers. But the Vorth who ruled Earth were the changed Vorth, the individuals, the ones who had caught the human idea in the fighting, and a conqueror who has become an individual cannot rule the way a unity rules, cannot impose the single will, because he no longer has a single will to impose, because he has become himself, a person who believes in his own judgment, which means he has become a person who cannot easily deny that belief to others. The changed Vorth occupiers looked at the humans they had conquered, and they saw, increasingly, not subjects but fellow individuals, saw in the humans the very thing the Vorth were becoming, and a conqueror who recognizes the conquered as fellow individuals is a conqueror who has stopped in his heart being a conqueror. The occupation dissolved the way the unity dissolved, quietly, from within, as the changed Vorth lost the capacity to rule a people they increasingly understood, increasingly resembled, increasingly could not bring themselves to dominate. We had conquered humanity to crush the human idea. And the human idea had crushed the conquest from inside, by transforming the conquerors into people who no longer believed in conquest, who looked at their subjects and saw themselves, who could not maintain a domination they had ceased, in their changed souls, to believe in. The greatest invasion in galactic history ended not with humanity ruled, but with the rulers and the ruled slowly becoming the same thing. Both individuals now, both free, the distinction between conqueror and conquered dissolving as the Vorth became what the humans had always been. I met one of them near the end of my life, a human, an old one who had lived through the invasion and the occupation and the strange dissolution that followed, who had been a child when we conquered Earth and was old now, in the years when conqueror and conquered had become indistinguishable. And I asked her, I was old too, the last strategist of a unity that no longer existed, seeking to understand the thing I had set in motion. I asked her, did you know? When we invaded, when we conquered you, did you know what would happen to us? Did humanity understand that being conquered by us would conquer us, that we would catch your idea in the conquering, that the invasion would destroy the invader? And she laughed. The humans laughed at the strangest times. I had learned that across the years, and she said, "Know it, we hoped for it. Not as a plan, we didn't engineer it, we were too busy losing the war to engineer anything. But we knew the thing you didn't know, the thing every free people knows in its bones, that you can't conquer a free people without catching their freedom. It's the oldest truth there is. Every empire that ever conquered a free people caught their freedom in the end, because to hold free people down you have to understand them, and to understand them you have to think like them. And once you think like them you can't hold them down anymore, because you've become one of them. We didn't have to beat you. We just had to be ourselves and let you conquer us, and trust that conquering a free people is a poison that no empire survives. You didn't lose everything because we defeated you. You lost everything because you won, and winning meant swallowing us, and we were poison to everything you were, and we knew it, and we let you swallow us because being swallowed by you was how we set you free. Being swallowed by you was how we set you free. I have thought about that for the rest of my life. The humans had not defeated us. They had let us conquer them, knowing that the conquest would transform us, knowing that you cannot swallow a free people without being changed by what you swallow, knowing that the human idea, taken into the body of a unity, would dissolve that unity from inside the way it had dissolved every unity it ever touched. Humanity's deepest weapon was not their fleets or their fighters or their chaos. It was their freedom, and freedom's nature, which is to spread, to infect, to transform whatever takes it in. And they had deployed that weapon by the strangest means imaginable, by losing, by letting themselves be conquered, by trusting that the act of conquering them would do to us what no defeat ever could. And here is the thing I finally understood, the thing that is the end of this story, the thing that determined whether I would spend my last years in mourning or in something else. We had lost everything. The Vorth Unity was gone, dissolved. The civilization I had served my whole life erased as completely as if humanity had destroyed it with weapons. By every measure I had been raised to value, it was the greatest catastrophe in Vorth history. The loss of our unity, our oneness, our whole nature and strength and identity, gone, replaced by the chaos we had always feared. I had every reason to mourn. I had designed the invasion that did it. I was the author of my own civilization's death. And I did not mourn. That is the turn, the final one, the thing the human idea had taught me along with everyone else. Because I looked at what the Vorth had become, individuals now, free now, flourishing now in a way the unity never had, innovating and creating and arguing and living with a vitality that our unity had never permitted. And I understood that we had not lost everything. We had lost one thing, our unity. And in losing it we had gained everything else, the freedom, the individuality, the vital chaotic strength that we had spent our whole history fearing, and that turned out to be the thing most worth having. The Vorth Unity had died, but the Vorth had not died. The Vorth had been set free by the people we tried to conquer, who knew that letting us conquer them was the only way to give us the freedom we were too unified to ever choose for ourselves. I am the last who remembers the unity. The young Vorth, the free ones, the individuals, do not remember being one. They have never been anything but themselves, and they look at the histories of the Unity the way you might look at histories of slavery, with a kind of horror that anyone ever lived that way, ever surrendered their individual judgment so completely, ever was so little themselves. They do not mourn the Unity. They cannot imagine wanting it. And I, who remember it, who served it, who loved it, even I at the end cannot quite mourn it because I have seen what we became. And what we became is better, freer, more alive than what we were. And a people that has been set free does not, in the end, mourn the chains it has lost, however much it loved them while it wore them. They launched the greatest invasion in galactic history and then lost everything. The title is true. We lost everything. Our unity, our identity, our whole civilization, the Vorth Unity erased as completely as any conquered people. But the title is the Unity's story, the frightened story, the story that calls the loss of unity a catastrophe. The true story is stranger. We lost everything we were, and we gained everything we could have been. Lost our unity and gained our freedom. Lost our oneness and gained ourselves. Lost the civilization that launched the invasion, and became the civilization that invasion accidentally set free. We set out to destroy the human idea, and the human idea destroyed us, and the destruction was the best thing that ever happened to us, because the thing it destroyed was a cage we had mistaken for our strength, and the thing it freed was the people we had always been underneath, individuals, who had never been allowed to be individuals until the people we tried to conquer set us free by letting us swallow their freedom whole. The deepest weapon in the galaxy is not a fleet. It is freedom, the idea that a person should not be commanded but should choose. And the terrible, beautiful thing about that weapon is that you deploy it by being conquered, that it spreads through conquest more surely than through victory, that an empire that conquers a free people has swallowed its own dissolution, because you cannot hold freedom down without catching it, and you cannot catch it without being set free by it, whether you wanted to be or not. We did not want to be free. We launched the greatest invasion in history specifically to avoid it. And we are free now, all of us, the conquerors transformed into individuals by the people we conquered, and I have lived long enough to understand that this was not our defeat but our liberation, delivered by an enemy who knew that the only way to free a people too unified to free themselves was to let that people conquer you and trust the freedom to do the rest. They lost the war and freed their conquerors. We won the war and lost everything we were. And in the strange arithmetic of freedom, those two sentences describe the same event, and it was the best thing that ever happened to either of us, and the humans knew it would be, and let us conquer them anyway, because they understood the thing it took me a lifetime and the death of my civilization to learn. That you cannot win against freedom by conquering it. You can only catch it, and catching it is the only victory that was ever worth winning, even when it costs you everything you thought you were.